let's get on and talk more about Scrumban. You join me in the shed at the bottom of the garden. I'm here with my British cup of tea because it's traditional, but it's kind of a strange drink to be having given that it is so warm today. If your Scrum team is underperforming, if you're sick and tired of estimating, or if you're curious about moving over to Kanban, then you are definitely in the right place. Scrumban is the best way I know to get more out of Scrum, to reduce reliance on them pesky estimates, possibly even reduce them to eliminate them completely. And for those who are ready, but entirely optionally, to make the transition from Scrum to Kanban, and to make it almost a trivial step, getting to a point where stepping over to Kanban is a baby step rather than a giant leap. My name is Gary Strawn, if we haven't met before. I'm the founder of Development That Pays, which began life as a channel on YouTube. If you found me through YouTube, the chances are good that you watched this video. Am I pointing in the right direction? The Scrum versus Kanban video is, well, in my world, it's the nearest thing I've had to a viral video. It's been watched almost 2 million times, which is crazy. And it wasn't long after I did that video that I started to get asked to do Scrumban, and I avoided it. It was on my list of possible, video titles for the future, but I avoided it because I assumed, and it's a common assumption, is it not, that it was just some kind of hybrid framework. But I eventually did get around to looking into this, in quotes, hybrid framework, and I found that wasn't really what it was at all. What I found was something much more powerful, something with the power to transform Scrum. So if Scrum is not working for you as well as you think it should, and if you've been tearing your hair out with their estimates, even if you've wondered about Kanban might be a better option for you, then Scrumban might be exactly what you've been looking for. So let's dive into this strange thing, Scrumban. And I usually draw my Scrum and my Kanban like this, and we're using lovely colors, and I try to keep blue for Scrum, and I try to keep green for Kanban, but I knew I was going to be doing a Venn diagram or two today. So I thought I better refresh my memory about how to do a proper Venn diagram. And the first thing I learned is that you've got to be careful with your coloring in. So I'm back to black and white and empty circles. Also, there's a thing you're supposed to put into a Venn diagram, often omitted, which is the whole universe. So you see, you're learning something here. This is great, and it's not even anything to do with Agile. Fantastic. So Scrum, that would be Scrum. That's my coloring in. So if I color in that area, we're talking about Scrum. If I color in that area, it's Kanban. And if I color in this area, it's neither Scrum nor Kanban. I think you know how this thing works. Anyway, by the way, this thing, I no idea what that is. I suppose no element of Scrum, no element of Kanban. Don't know. I wanted to say waterfall, but I'm not. I need to think about that some more. So that being the case, when we intersect the rings, well, we end up with an area that's a bit of Scrum and a bit of Kanban, and I suppose the general feeling, it's become a common assumption, perhaps a misapprehension, we'll come to that must be Scrumban. The best of both worlds, we are led to believe. The best of Scrum, the best of Kanban, what's not to like? And It does make sense, at least it does on the surface, but yeah, interesting. So just to come back to this picture, what is this? I mean, it's almost a dumb question. It's a good bit of Scrum, but with a bit of Scrum missing. And is that okay? Well, the Scrum Guide is pretty clear on this subject. The Scrum framework as outlined here, sorry, the text is too small, but I'll read it for you. The Scrum framework as outlined herein is immutable. While implementing only parts of Scrum is possible, the result is not Scrum. So the moment we deviate from the Scrum Guide, well, we're not doing Scrum anymore. So that area is clearly not Scrum. What some people describe, and I love this description, as Scrum, but without the bits that we find difficult, inconvenient, etc. So just for fun, and this is just for fun in very, very big letters, nothing to be implied from this, here are the main elements of Scrum. We're not going to get into the fine print, I'm not going to be checking you're working, but have a look at that list and let me know that if you had to, if we would run some competition to remove something from Scrum to create a whole new framework that we don't even have a name for yet, what would you consider removing from Scrum? So there, and I'll read out the usual, the main items here. I'm not going to talk about the principles, not talking about the values, but you have the 3 roles: developers, product owner, and Scrum Master. You have the 5 events: the sprint, which of course is the wrapper for the other events, sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. And last but by no means least, you also have the artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. So have a think. Is there something, like I said, if I held a gun to your head, this is a terrible image, if I held a gun to your head, what would you take out of Scrumban? You must have fantasized about this at some point. What you could, or perhaps you've already, oh my goodness, perhaps you've already decided that there's something in Scrumban that you can live without and you've discarded. I do wonder. So I'm going to pause and check in those comments. Fabio, I almost said something when I was reading the list, and I almost forbade you to do this one, but then I thought better of it. So the sprint. Oh, hold on, no, I might have given the game away. Forget what I just said. I'm going to delete that from the replay. If you're watching the replay, nothing just happened there. Okay. Here's the one I thought was going to be, well, one of the ones that I thought would come up. The daily Scrum is the biggest waste of time. Ooh, I really wish we had some time to go into that. That's one of my favorite subjects, actually. Sprint review. Here's one. Okay. Another suggestion would be the sprint review. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Try not to be judgy in these things. Sprint planning. Okay. Yeah. Dennis says I would keep all of it. Well, yes, of course you would keep all of it, but gun to the head kind of situation. We're playing here. Let's have a look. Any more? And Boris is kind of saying the same thing. It's all necessary. Yeah. Okay. I think perhaps the only one that's appeared on the list more than once is the sprint. Okay. As I said, just for fun, we may come back to talk more about this in a minute. All right, let's move on. Scrum but, we just talked about that. Scrum but, the bits we'd rather not do, versus Scrum and. This is an important distinction. Going back to what I was telling you before about that video and looking for the hybrid framework. When I first said, okay, I'm going to go and do a video on this, I better go and find out about it, I did what anyone would do, right? I Googled the damn thing, and I found all kinds of references to a hybrid framework. But what I found was far too many references to a hybrid framework. All of them, what they all had in common were they were a bit of Scrum and a bit of Kanban, but beyond that, I really couldn't find any agreement. So I got onto the Amazon and I bought the book. The book that started all this trouble. Oh, there's a slide. Yeah. Corey Ladas literally wrote the book. Here it is on Scrumban. So I went back to the source and I started reading this thing. And quick book review here. It's full of fantastic stuff, but it's a bit of a heavy read, if I'm honest. However, I am waving it around to you to emphasize the fact that I didn't find a hybrid framework in here, or at least certainly in the first 2/3 of the book, there ain't no hybrid framework here. And that was a big surprise, given what I'd found from Googling. Turns out that what Corey Ladas had in mind writing this book was Scrumban as a pathway that started from Scrum and ended up somewhere else, ended up not Scrum, essentially ended up in Kanban land. But the journey though I found fascinating, because the first step looked a lot like Scrum. It was Scrum. The second step, as we went on and on through these intermediate stages, pretty much right till the end, it was all Scrum. So this step was Scrum, 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 and possibly this step was also Scrum. So 5 steps, possibly 6, where we remain 100% Scrum Guide compliant. But more than that, and this is the thing that really captured my attention, the things that I found, the things that were being added to Scrum were, well, the things that I'd experienced in various other teams that seemed to be the things that made all the difference. Simple things to describe, often not that easy to implement. But once implemented, once understood, once the team got used to them, the things that really started to make things tick within the team. So I ended up going pretty, and this is around 4 years ago when I first discovered Scrumban, read the book, came up with a cheat sheet. And the cheat sheet went down very well. A lot of people were filling in the form to get a copy of it, and the video that I did to go along with it did very, very well. So I took the next step. I did a course on Scrumban, and that went very well. So I did another course on Scrumban, incorporating all of the things that I'd learned while doing the first Scrumban course. By the way, I haven't mentioned selling you stuff. I can tell you that I'm not going to be making a pitch for either of these things today, but I might be making a pitch for something else where you would get these 2 things for free. So I'll fess that up right now. Talking of free, if you'd like a copy of this cheat sheet, which outlines all of the steps that all of the stages that I'm going to go through now, then you can grab it at my website. So a quick Google for development that pays would be the easiest way to find it, and then put at the end /SB, SB for Scrumban. So I'll leave that on the screen for just 1 second. Give you a chance to get that, and I'll just have a quick, hopefully silent slurp of the British Standard cup of tea. Excellent. All right, now, hopefully you've had a chance to get that. Actually, why don't I think it would be handy for me to drop that into the comments. Yeah, there it is. James, I've just seen your comment. Fantastic. Look at this, everyone. Should be renamed Ban Scrum. Wow. I feel a t-shirt coming on. Do you? I feel there's something. I think there's some magic there. All right. Let's move on. Oh, sorry, I pushed the wrong button and everything went strange. All right. Oh. Oh, I seem to have lost. Okay. Control, I think, is coming back. I hope it is. Excellent. Okay, that's better. All right. Let's go through these things one by one, starting with visualize the work. Oh, I'm still having trouble with my control here. Better. So, 2 easy steps to get started, as it says here. Get a board. I think most people have a board these days, and importantly, make it agree with the way that you work right now. So if in your team it is customary for work to be picked up and designed and then perhaps passed on to someone else for the dev and then passed on to someone else for testing, if that is your world, then you probably should have a board that looks like this with 3 columns. If you don't do that, if people tend to pick up an item of work and work through it all the way to the end, it might be a simple to-do, doing, done is the board for you. The trick here, the key, actually, just before we go on, I've remembered what I wanted to say here and why there's an indication of an epiphany that I had in the middle of doing a training that was all about boards, going into board stuff in detail. That a board can do 2 things for you. It first of all reflects the way that you work. So starting with what you do now, just make the board look like that, and of course evolve as necessary later. But it also occurred to me that a board, and we'll get to this in a moment, a board can impact how you work. It can influence you to work in a way that you might not have worked in the beginning. But what we're talking about right at the moment in this first step of visualize the work is start where you are now. That's a Kanban principle. You'll be seeing more Kanban as we go on. Start where you are and reflect that on your board. This will be great for you if used correctly for stand-ups. I love to use the walk the wall style of stand-ups. If you don't know what that is, ask in the comments and I'm sure someone will answer for you. Anyone who's been on my trainings before, I almost always talk about it, but for once I'm not going to talk about it today. It starts to give everyone an overview of the work, all of the work, the whole sprint backlog's worth of work, and start because of that to foster some teamwork. So interesting that a board that's the right shape for your team can have a very positive consequence of helping to foster teamwork, and we're going to be seeing that again as we move on. All right, number 2 is what Corey Ladas refers to as stopping early binding. What is early binding? Early binding is that when you're doing your sprint planning, coming up with those items for the sprint backlog, that you at that point decide who is going to be working on each piece of work. The problem with doing that is when the work comes to be picked up, we don't pick up the most important work, right? We pick up the one that was for us. Better to assign work at the time that it is picked up, so that we have the opportunity of picking up the most important piece of work at the particular time. Even, and this might feel like a disadvantage, but it actually turns out to be an advantage, even if you're picking up work that you're not easily able to do. Because what this encourages is you to go and it encourages team members to work together. So if I'm picking up a piece of work that frankly terrifies me, I will go and find the person who would normally do this kind of work and possibly do some pair programming, basically get some assistance. Now, why would we do that? Why isn't it just more advanced? Why don't we just give it to the person who can do it and get it over with? Well, we might decide to do that. The advantage of passing on some of that information to me is that the team just got an uplift in what it can, in its performance essentially, because it means the next time a piece of work comes along of that type, there are now two people in the team, me and the brain box who would normally do it. There's now two of us can do it, and we might get it to a point where three of us could do it. So we want to get to that point where we can the team as a whole can handle pretty much anything that comes at it. And one of the ways we do that is by not early binding, we do late binding. So it's really all about flexibility. Alrighty. Oh, and Judith said single point of failure. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, wish I'd said that. Next time I do this, if we do this again, I'll definitely put that in. All right. Impose work in progress limits. One of my favorite things. This is the board impacting the way people work. I think you may have heard from me the story before of being in a Scrum team that split in two, with my ex-colleagues ditching Scrum like a hot potato, and what they thought they were doing was Kanban. And again, the story I tell is they moved up to another floor, went to take a look at how they were getting on a couple of weeks in, and couldn't believe their board. They had what they described as a Kanban board. They had many columns. They had reflected the way that they worked. No problem with that. WIP limits, though, were distinctly lacking. I saw cards going all the way down the board and all the way down the wall, and in some cases they were propped up on the skirting board. Is skirting board a word that is used in the States? Is that a word that translates? It's the bit at the bottom, just before the carpet, just above the carpet, if you have a carpet. Skirting board, is that a word? I feel like that's a thing that might have a different name in the States. Let me know. I'd love to know the answer to that. Just, I should learn something on these things as well, right? So my teammates thought they were doing Kanban, but because of the complete lack of WIP limits, they most certainly were not. Baseboard, Alex, thank you very much. The baseboard. Yeah, I had a feeling. I lived in the States for a while. I picked up a few words, but I think I missed that one for some reason. Yeah. Oh, trim could also be called trim. Yeah, I guess it could. Where was I? Yeah. Now, you imagine a board with cards going all the way down to the floor, and you imagine what the length of the queue that card that's way down on the baseboard, it's got to wait for everything above it to move along before it gets a chance to be worked on, only to be put at the bottom of a queue that's almost as long, right? What you do there without the work in progress limits is to maximize the time that items take to get from one side of the board to the other. So putting in those WIP limits without going into too much detail removes waste. The waste that we have when something is just hanging around. Taking weeks perhaps between dev done and testing. Can you imagine when the tester goes back to the dev to ask a question? Dev has forgotten about it weeks ago. Awful. So yeah, work moves across the board faster. Again, something we don't really have time to go into in detail, but one of the things that happens when you impose work limits is that you eventually, sooner rather than later, have a situation where work gets stuck. And what this does, and it's a lovely side effect, is to cause, encourage, compel team members to talk to each other to figure out how the log jam might be eased. A powerful and very much welcome side effect to imposing WIP limits. All right, let's move on. Swapping push for pull by adding these strange grey columns. This board by Scrum standards, I think it's true to say that most, you correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I will go out on a limb and say that most Scrum teams are probably using 3 columns to do, doing and done. And again, that might be enough for their purposes. So this is already a complicated looking board compared to what you might be used to. Why would I want to add in additional funny colored columns? Well, it's kind of to do with fairness. So this move to do into design is a pull, right? That item only comes in when design is ready for it, good and ready for it, right? There's nobody standing in to do pushing work into design. At least I hope there isn't. So work is picked up by design and pulled into to do. But what about this move? So design's finished an item and it's ready and the item is ready to move on. That move, which would be initiated by dev, is a push. It's a push because dev didn't ask for it. They got something in their column that they never asked for. I've been on loads of teams where this was exactly what happened, and I found it rude, to be honest. Never mind push versus pull, it's just rude. Don't send me stuff when I don't ask for it. Same thing here, when dev is finished, it's got no choice really, given the board as it stands, to push it into test. Rude, disgraceful. So let's fix that, and we fix it with these done columns, right? It gives design the opportunity to say, okay, I've finished with it now, I can put it into this done column. That's not a push, it's really just a change of state. It still belongs to done. Sorry, it still belongs to design. Now the fairness has been restored because this move is a pull. Dev is looking for work, it looks to that done column knowing that it's available to pull in, and it does exactly that, a pull. What we have here is the identical situation really to design pulling in from to do. Design can do it, dev should be able to do it too. Same thing with test. No pushing. This move here is this move here is test deciding that they're ready for new work and pulling it in. So pull, pull, pull all the way along. Fairness restored. And does it have any other? Yeah, I mean, there's some nice, again, positive side effects of doing this. Maybe we'll get into that another time. But yeah, this one's mainly about fairness, but it also helps us to do something that I think is logical, but we tend to forget about in the rush of day to day, which is don't design what you can't build. don't build what you can't test. Don't test, I suppose, what you can't ship. And it goes on down the line. I mean, this is really kind of just-in-time thinking. As I said, we lose sight of that in the kind of our day-to-day hurry, but that's basically what we should be aiming for this all the time. And when we swap push for pull, that's essentially what we're doing. I want to talk about Toyota now, but that's another. I'll be wasting time that probably we should be spent. How are we doing for time? Actually, not bad for time. That's great. All right, the next one, and it's 4 years since I've looked at this picture, and I'm not entirely happy with it. And here's what's changed in my thinking. What I like is the idea that you take a sprint backlog and you kind of go one step further than many teams do, but your team might be doing this. So we start with the backlog, which is this big, huge hunking thing. And what Scrum does for us is it focuses in on a much smaller subset, right? The sprint backlog. What I'm suggesting here, or what this step brings to us, is to go even more granular to what's next. So, and what difference does that make? Only that we take the sprint backlog and we order it. So we decide which, in an ideal world and subject to pairing and getting help from other people, in an ideal world, here's the item that's going to go first, here's the one that's going to go second, here's the one that's going to go third. And the only thing that I'm questioning now, looking at it with fresh eyes, is whether we actually need another column in order to implement that. I think in most cases we could implement ordering just using the to-do column, just have a column that represents the whole sprint backlog, and we can order and reorder to our heart's content, which actually is a really good point. That one of that shouldn't be a one and done ordering. To get the most juice out of this, it should be possible to reorder the sprint backlog at any time. So if it hasn't been picked up, that whole column, anything that hasn't been picked up, in other words, everything that's in the to-do column, is fair game for reordering. We can change our minds at a moment's notice, right? So that's what this is. So, and this I suppose is an implementation of responding to change over following a plan. 10 points if you can tell me where I stole those words from. Let me know in the comments. Where are the comments? The comments are probably down here. Oh, I'm just scanning the comments as well. Oh, many good comments here. Oh, there's some great comments that I wish I'm just going to going back to what we were talking before. This is such a good comment. I want to put it on the screen. So this idea of pull all the way along. Alex has said that done becomes the backlog for the next column. Exactly right. Exactly right. It does. Yeah, and that's the symmetry that we get when we put in those buffer columns. The buffer columns are the enabler of this lovely symmetry that goes, backlog doing, and then finally done. Yeah, excellent, good. Okay, responding to a change over following a plan. Lots of you got it. Who was the first? Israel, I think you were there. It comes from the Agile Manifesto. I think there might be a typo there, but we absolutely knew what you meant. Mark, you were there. Alex, Andre, Anjali. Oh, Anjali, long time no see. Hi. And Nigel has a question. Let me put it on that screen. Yeah, I'm not sure. This is I'm not. Yeah, for my money, if there are those kinds of questions open on a story, then it probably shouldn't be in the sprint backlog. I think I would expect that all of those things would be a condition of an item, a story, a work item, whatever you call it, a condition of it getting into the sprint backlog in the first place. Other people might have different opinions. So, yeah, just to be clear, and I think I've muddied the waters by suggesting you don't actually need a ready column, but it's entirely up to you. It doesn't really change anything, but it might be an unnecessary complication. So in the picture you see over there, to do can be in any order, but we definitely want the next couple or 3 items to be ordered. Yeah, enough said on that, I think. Great. Now, what is that? Where have we got to? I think we're getting to an interesting stage. So far, and this is where I want the audience police to keep me honest. So far, I think we have been 100% Scrum Guide compliant. None of the changes I've talked about have gone against anything that the Scrum Guide says, unless you know different. But I should also say that shouldn't really come as a surprise. We're used to hearing, we're told 100 times, I'm sure you've heard it, you might have even told others, that Scrum is a framework, right? Not a methodology. It doesn't tell you exactly how to do stuff and that was very intentional. So you can do things in the way that you want to do them. You can add to Scrum. We talked about not taking away, but you can add all kinds of things. That's the nature of a framework. So in terms of the Venn diagram that I had so much fun with earlier, the moves that we've made so far have been, actually, I would argue, here's something I maybe should have mentioned earlier. I could argue that Scrum and Kanban, the Venn diagram, always overlaps. I would say there's no way, in my opinion, and don't ask me for an example, but Scrum in its kind of pure framework form, I don't think it's entirely Kanban. It's not entirely free of Kanban elements. And if you look at Kanban, I'm sure we'd find some things in there that we would also find in Scrum. So I think an intersecting Venn diagram is the kind of the real world. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. That's the word. But anyway, that's probably a discussion for another day. But we started with, whether we started with them intersecting or not, we've done this. We've added more Kanban at every step. But what is shaded has been Scrum. So Scrum has been taking in more and more Kanban, but it's still Scrum. No Scrum but so far. At least I don't think so. But what about stage 6? What about stage 6 indeed? So at stage 6, I would encourage, and if you've been on trainings with me before, you know I'm often encouraging people to stop estimating. Now, the question here becomes, can you do Scrum without estimating? So what information can I give you, members of the jury, to help you make your decision about whether it breaks Scrum? Well, I can tell you that although the Scrum Guide used to talk about estimating, it doesn't anymore. I've searched. I have used a search feature to look for the word forecast, forecasting, forecast, that kind of stuff. It's no longer anywhere there in the Scrum Guide. And again, that doesn't mean to say you can't, because again, it's a framework, you could put it in if you want. And this gets back to, I think this comes to well, actually no, let's take this a step at a time. These 4 stages: visualizing the work, stopping the early binding, imposing weight limits, and swapping the push for pull, they all help set things up so that work moves through your system in a more predictable way, in a smoother fashion. So you get to a situation where the work that you can take in during a sprint becomes you're more easily able. That should be one of the nice side effects of this. You should be more able to say, okay, this is the amount of work we normally do. This is the amount of work that we can do in this sprint. And actually you can go, there's a very important change I can make to that sentence. We did about a dozen items in the last sprint. So we probably need about a dozen items for this sprint. So it really all depends on whether you can get to a point where you can just count items when selecting a sprint backlog. So these things all help. Oops, all of a sudden pointing the wrong way. These things all help. Again, if you've been on other trainings with me, you know I'm a huge fan of story slicing. I even made a little a masterclass about it. So and this gets to, I saw someone, let me have a look. Oh, what was that? Maybe I didn't. Maybe I imagined what I saw. So yeah, all of these things plus story slicing get you to a point where you get nearer to be able to say, yeah, a dozen stories will do it. And this brings us to the question I asked at the top of the hour, all about how precious you are, how fixed your Scrum backlog is. Because I think if you are at a point where saying, okay, I think we've selected 12 stories, because we usually do around about 12. We select 12 stories, and that's far too many for this. It ends up, the experience of the current sprint is that was too many or too few, and that's a problem. Then maybe this is the stage that does break Scrum. For the longest time, I thought, no, it's definitely breaks Scrum. I really can't see I can't see us doing Scrum without being able to estimate, if only, and actually only for the purposes of selecting work for the sprint backlog. But as I've learned more about flow that we get from these, as I've learned more about story slicing, so we never ever end up with a huge 40 pointer or whatever. As I've learned more about that, and as I've asked the question in fora like this about how precious people are, how fixed they are with the Scrum backlog, I kind of now think that it probably doesn't break Scrum. So good question. Israel says, can you paste a link to the story slicing video? I'm not sure I've done a video on story slicing. I did. What you see there on the screen, this masterclass, is something that I've only given away as part of another course or program, and I might be giving it away later today. Stay tuned. Thank you very much for asking that question. Perfectly timed. All right, back we go again. So we're here to talk about Scrum. The title of the thing today was Scrum. So if you don't want to hear about this, that's fine. Just for the sake of completeness, let's talk about the very final step. This one, without a doubt, unconditionally breaks Scrum. Completely breaks it. Trigger planning is where if you know anything about Kanban, you know the work is king. We trigger everything off the work. And this is kind of the next step of, instead of triggering a sprint planning session, what you probably don't think about this way, but there is a trigger for sprint planning, and the trigger is the calendar. You choose a length for your sprint. You choose a date for the beginning, or rather a day of the week for the beginning of your sprint, and that day of the week becomes the trigger for sprint planning. What we do in this stage is to say, no, it's now the work that triggers the sprint planning. We don't do it according to the calendar. We do it when we begin to run out of work. And by the way, this is very much how a supermarket manages its stock. And yeah, oh, actually, I didn't realize how much was hiding in this image. Yeah, the way we do it is by establishing a reorder point, which is the line that's just about in line with what I'm pointing here. The striped line, the yellow and black line. So when we 4 items at the moment in to do is fine, but when we get to 3, that's a trigger to organize a meeting. Doesn't have to happen the same day. It's just like, we've got 3 to work on, that'll be fine. We've got just enough time to organize a sprint planning meeting. Not a sprint, yeah, it's probably not called a sprint planning meeting, is it? By the way, yeah. So yeah, sorry, I had another thought in my head that interrupted me right in the middle of a sentence. When we hit that reorder point, we organize the sprint planning, come up with another list of items for the to-do column, and we again start working through those. By the way, and this is the thought that interrupted my thinking, my sentence, that's when I asked you right back at the beginning about if you had to take Scrum and drop something from it, the one that was the most popular option was what we've just done here, to effectively remove the sprint. And it occurs to me, I don't know what you think, that if you start with Scrum but don't do the sprint, so we're definitely in Scrum but land here, we've broken Scrum, no doubt about it, but Scrum, take away the sprints, that feels to me that if someone had got organized, perhaps someone had been more explicit in this book, perhaps somehow the internet had got organized, we might have given that particular framework a name, and we might now not have all of the confusion that's out there in the world about this thing called Scrumban. But that cat is out of the bag. Pandora's box has been opened. I think Scrumban as the framework, given the mess there is online, it's effectively become useless. But I think Scrumban, viewed in the way I've been talking about it today, as this as this pathway, is where all the value is. So yeah, that's what I found in that book. That's what I've been hopefully been sharing with you today. Benefits are many, but include better stand-ups, with everyone having a much better idea of the work as a whole. Better teamwork comes about as a result of having a board that reflects the work, as a result of having work in progress that occasionally drag the team members together, perhaps kicking and screaming. Faster delivery thanks to those work in progress limits that makes sure that we get across that board in the shortest possible time. And for those of you who feel it's appropriate, if you feel that you can get to a point where you can just count stories for the sprint backlog, you can think about moving away from those pesky estimates. So, in the time that we have had today, I've really just been able to brush over kind of a very surface level of each of the stages, and I would love to be able to be of much more help. So I have something for you, an event, an experience no less, something that I am calling, oops, where's my next slide? The Summer of Scrumban. After 4 years of not teaching Scrumban, I'm coming back with a bang, with a 6 week live experience, and I would love to have you along. We'll do 6 live sessions. We'll start 1 week from today. If you're watching the replay, I probably should be more specific about the date. That's Wednesday the 26th of June. It will be starting at the same time this one did. Again, if you're watching the replay, that's not very helpful. I'll put the actual time and time zones on the screen. Hope to remember to do that. Yeah, as I said, runs for 6 weeks. Starts on the 26th of July. Starts on the 26th of June. Runs all the way through to the 31st of July. We'll meet for each session on Zoom. I'm going to use Zoom in this case because it gives us some opportunities that we can't easily do, for example, here on YouTube, of making the thing a little bit more interactive. We might occasionally use breakout rooms. I hesitate to mention that because that might have scared some of you off, but the breakout room is a great feature. If you've never used it before, I think you'll like it. At least you will after we get over the initial shock of it. And I'm gonna invite, and this will become important for you in a couple of ways, I'm gonna invite everyone who's done a Scrumban course with me before. So hopefully you're gonna be able to rub shoulders with people who have gone through this process. By the way, one of the reasons for doing it a week at a time is to leave a little bit of space to give you a chance to at least start implementing some of the things, some of those Scrumban stages. So hard to put a value on things, but I think I'm suggesting that the 6 Summer of Scrumban sessions are worth, let's say, $450. Access to the community could be something of equal value, I think. If that works as well as I hope it does, you'll learn as much from your colleagues as you do from me, and probably more so. So the question becomes, what would it mean to increase the performance of your Scrum team? What would it mean to your boss? What if you could stop estimating? What would that mean in terms of hours saved? And what would it mean in terms of man hours saved? Because man hours, as I'm sure you know, it's essentially money. If you're working in software, almost all of the cost is in those bodies, paying those bodies, and I suppose a little bit in keeping the lights on. So you can jump in and join me, join the Scrumban alumni for a one-time payment of $497. If you are watching the replay, you will find a link to that somewhere around this video. Not sure where actually. We'll figure that out. It's probably below. It's usually below. So you will get, as well as what I've talked about, access to past Scrumban products. There have been 2, and future Scrumban products or programs. So if we do this, if we have an autumn of Scrumban, for example, you get automatically included in that. So this is the first one. This is where we started Scrumban, the original, the OG. I then made a second version where things got a little bit tidier, a little more complete, using the learnings that came from doing it the first time around. So you'll get that as well. I mentioned the story slicing masterclass. This is This has never been off. I've never put it out on YouTube. For whoever, I think it was, I never put this out on YouTube. It's never been available as a standalone course. Never sold it. It's only been available as part of courses. I'm making it available as part of this summer experience. So counting all that up, the 6 meetings, the community. By the way, I'll be part of that community. You'll get access to me over those 6 weeks. The original blueprint, the blueprint 2.0, and of course that story slicing masterclass. All of that, a value of somewhere around $18.50, but you get all of that for a one-time payment of $497. Is there a guarantee? Yep, I'm going to take all the risk on this one. 30-day money-back guarantee. 30 days will give you, well, almost all of the experience. I'll even remind you on the session that would be the last one within the 30-day window that it is now or never to ask for your money back. I'm going to go ahead and remind you of that. If you don't like it for any reason, just let me know. No questions asked. If you don't love it, I don't want you to pay with you. I don't want you to pay for it. So that's the question. Are you ready to improve the performance of the team? Are you ready to bid farewell to estimates and estimating? And are you ready to make the transition to Kanban? But only, of course, if you want to. That's your summer of Scrumban. I really should have practiced saying it. Summer of Scrumban live experience. Those are all the details you need right there on the screen. And a reminder that we get cracking on the 26th of June. If you're here with me live, that's less than a week from now. So the clock is ticking. A couple of FAQs. What if you miss a session? Not a problem. Every session will be recorded and available within the private member area. How long will I have access? You will have access for the lifetime of the program. So essentially lifetime access. I suppose it might be my lifetime, as I'm probably the oldest one here. What about future programs? Yeah, if we do a Scrumban 3.0 or a Scrumban Autumn of Scrumban deal, you are automatically invited as a valuable alumnus. Let's recap that all really quickly. The Summer of Scrumban experience, 6 live sessions beginning on the 26th of June. Access to all of the recordings as you would expect. Access also to the Scrumban community, including alumni of previous Scrumban courses. Speaking of which, you get the full original Scrumban Blueprint course, the full 2.0 version of the Scrumban course. You also get the Story Slicing Masterclass, as I've said. Hasn't been made available as a standalone thing, only available as part of one of my programs, and you get it here. If you don't love it, I will give you your money back. That's a 30-day, 100% money back guarantee. And last but by no means least, the important thing, that this thing of course comes to a close on Wednesday the 26th of June, which is the day that we will be getting started. There's a summary of all the information I've just told you. You're in for a one-time payment of just $497.